I want to be precise about the timeline, because people have asked. The Vetherall High Convergence issued their formal classification of humanity at approximately 0340 station time on the 14th of Keth Cycle 7. The document was 11 pages long. 8 of those pages were procedural boilerplate, the kind of language that exists in every bureaucracy in the known galaxy, the part nobody reads, the part that specifies in considerable detail what a formal declaration is, and then formally declares that this is one. The 9th page was the classification itself. Humanity, it said, had been assessed against the Vethoral Sapience Threshold Index and found to occupy Tier 4 of a 4-tier scale. Tier 4 was labeled, without apparent irony, pre-sapient ambient noise. The 10th page explained that no formal response was required from the classified party, as formal response capacity was itself a Tier 3 threshold criterion, and we did not meet it. The 11th page was a signature block. The Convergence sent a junior envoy to collect the signature. Her name, her designation rather, the thing the translation matrix rendered as a name, was Veth Oral Sen. She was what the Vetherall call a third-tier administrative functionary, which is to say, she was the kind of official they send to do things that don't require an official. She had 6 of what I will call arms, for lack of a better word, arranged in 2 lateral sets of 3. The upper pair folded against her thorax in a posture the cultural briefing notes described as professional courtesy at minimum engagement level. Her face, if you called it that, was a smooth, pale surface, with a horizontal slot that served as a mouth and 2 amber lenses set close together that served as eyes. She had the bearing of someone who had been waiting in a lot of administrative anterooms for a very long time and had made a kind of peace with it. I was the only human present. This was, I should explain, not entirely an accident. I was the cultural liaison assigned to Ketherall Station's Human Vetherall Contact Desk, a posting that had been, up until that morning, largely ceremonial. The Vetherall did not, as a rule, contact us in any formal capacity. They acknowledged our presence at the station the way you acknowledge a draft coming under a door. Not with hostility exactly, just with the mild institutional awareness that something low-level and unclassified was occurring nearby. Sen arrived at 0347. She placed the 11-page document on the contact desk, folded all 6 arms into the minimum engagement posture, and delivered a verbal summary that took 40 seconds and used the phrase pre-sapient ambient noise twice. Then she produced a stylus. The Vetherall use a pressed mineral instrument that leaves a mark on any surface, a practical choice, and set it beside the signature block. I looked at the document for a moment. Then I asked her what the threshold criteria were. Sen's amber lenses adjusted. It was a small adjustment, the kind a camera makes when it wasn't expecting the light to be where it turned out to be. She said that the threshold criteria were detailed in the Vetherall Sapience Assessment Framework, 3rd Revised Edition. I said I didn't have a copy of that. She said that it was available through the Compact Archive on request. I said I would need to review the criteria before I could sign anything that relied on them. There was a pause. The pause had texture to it. I could tell she was running a brief internal calculation, the kind you run when a formality is not resolving the way formalities are supposed to resolve. She said that review was not customarily required for a Tier 4 classification, as Tier 4 parties did not generally have the procedural standing to request it. I said I understood that, but I was asking anyway. The pause was longer this time. She told me that the framework ran to 412 pages. I said that was fine. She did not leave. I think, in retrospect, this was the key moment, the place where things could have gone differently, where she could have simply retrieved the stylus and filed the document as refused and been done before lunch. But it would have been, I think, beneath her. The Convergence had sent her to collect a signature from a pre-sapient species, and pre-sapient species do not refuse. Leaving without the signature would have required her to classify the interaction as a complication, and classifying an interaction as a complication when you have been sent to perform a formality is, for a third-tier Vethoral administrative functionary, a professional embarrassment of a very specific kind. So she answered my question. She explained the framework. She explained the first section, which covered language and symbolic reasoning. I asked whether the threshold required generative language or whether recursive self-referential symbolic structures qualified. She said generative. I asked how the assessment had been conducted, given that we had generative language in 4,600 documented forms. She said that the assessment methodology was standardized. I asked who had standardized it. She said the Convergence Assessment Bureau. I asked when. She said 32 cycles ago. I asked whether the methodology had been updated since then. She said that methodologies were reviewed on a 60-cycle schedule. I said that seemed like a long time. She said that sapience thresholds were not considered a fast-moving field. I said I could see that. We moved to the second section, which covered tool use and environmental modification. I asked what the threshold ratio was for environmental modification relative to biome baseline. She told me. I asked whether terraforming counted. She said it was not in the framework. I asked why not. She said the framework predated widespread terraforming as a category. I said we had been terraforming things for about 200 years. She said the framework predated that. I said I thought that might be relevant. She said the framework was the framework. I said I understood. We were 3 hours in by the time we reached Section 7, which covered collective decision-making and social coordination. I asked what the threshold definition of coordinated social behavior was. She gave it to me. I asked whether governance counted. She said rudimentary governance was a Tier 3 indicator. I asked what Tier 3 looked like. She described it. I said it sounded a lot like what we had, except we had more of it, and it argued with itself more loudly. She said the arguing was not a Tier 3 indicator. I said I thought that might depend on how you defined arguing. She said she did not have the definitional annex with her. I said I could wait. She did not have a definitional annex. At hour 5, Sen stopped mid-sentence. She had been explaining the Tier 2 social bonding index, and there was a pause that was different from the earlier pauses. The earlier pauses had been procedural, the natural rhythm of a formality that wasn't quite finishing. This one was something else. I had been a cultural liaison long enough to recognize it. It was the pause of someone who had arrived somewhere they had not expected to arrive. She said, in a register that the translation matrix rendered as careful, that she would need to file an interim notation. I said that was fine. She said the formality was not resolved. I said I knew. I asked if she wanted the station's canteen to send something down. The Vetherol have a secondary nutrient intake process that, as far as I have been able to determine, is roughly analogous to tea. She accepted. She filed her mission report at 1:12 the following morning, 14 hours and 25 minutes after she had arrived. I have read it, because it was forwarded to the Human Vetherol Contact Desk as the relevant affected party. It classified our interaction as an unresolved administrative formality, pending recontact. It noted, under methodology, that the assessment framework in question may require supplemental review in light of procedural engagement capacity demonstrated by the subject party. It was careful not to say what that supplemental review might find. 12 days later, the Convergence sent a formal delegation. It was not a junior delegation. It was not a formality. It was 7 senior-tier officials with a mandate to conduct what the accompanying document described as a supplemental sapience assessment, accelerated review track, non-standard initiation. The compact archivists, when I showed them the document, said they had no record of a supplemental assessment on the accelerated review track ever being initiated for a species below Tier 2. Nobody asked me to explain what I had said to Sen for 14 hours. I did not volunteer it. The questions were not, in themselves, interesting. They were just questions. The kind any person asks when someone hands them an 11-page document and tells them to sign it. I had simply kept asking them, and Sen had kept answering them, because that was the kind of official she was. I did find out, eventually, what I had done wrong. Nothing, as it turned out. That was the problem. The stylus is still on my desk. She left it there.